All right, let's give the people what they want. We're going to get right into it. The Super Bowl Bengals. I mean, these guys were playing for the big game not that long ago, came out of nowhere.
Wild.
Still kind of weird to think about that the Bengals were in the Super
is.
Bowl. And so let's talk Bengals. Go ahead, Wolf.
Yeah, so as you can see, we've noticed this trend a bit on some of the best teams in the league. You think they must just be crazy offenses, and they are. They have the talent, they put up the yards, but it actually usually doesn't come at a huge amount of plays. You can see here, I actually have the Bengals going minus 38, the league average, in total plays, and that's pretty in line with what we've seen under Zach Taylor, minus 44, minus 26. So they run fewer plays. They're just so damn good with the ones they do, and then they can bleed out the clock and all that good stuff. So I think that's just a common misconception. You think the high-powered Bengals with T. Higgins and Jamar Chase must be just chucking the lights out of the stadium, right? But no, it ends up being usually the opposite effect that we often see. So I have them a little less than league average in terms of plays, 57% pass, 43% rush. And that gives you a pretty decent enough pie because this pie is so very concentrated, which we can now get into.
I love the concentrated pie. I love how we run this pie thing. Also, just for the record, because we did just go through 16 teams yesterday, so I got a little context now. 57-43 is actually a pretty big discrepancy when you're talking run pass. It's one of the bigger ones we saw. I think I only saw one team above 60. So anything up around there, that's a pretty substantial difference, at least compared to the NFC teams we went over yesterday. You want to talk about some discrepancies, or do you want to just get right into your guys?
Well, yeah, let me know where they pop up. I'll get into the guys, and you can let me know as I rave about them if you're sucking off Joe Mixon, but you only have him here. I don't expect that to be the case because I love Joe Mixon, so I imagine they're
always unapologetically love Joe Mixon. It's true.
It's true, and it's finally been coming into fruition. And the best part about him is the price doesn't go up. He's still going in early to sometimes even mid round 2. I'm seeing him fall, which is crazy. I have him at 68% of the rush share. He was right around that last year. And so even though it's not the biggest of ground pies, as you just hinted at, 290 carries is what that amounts to. That would be towards the top in the league in running back carries, and I think Mixon will see that.
He's a true bell cow, though. I mean, it's not a huge running offense, but the running that they're doing is from this guy.
Exactly. And the one thing that got annoying midseason, and as you can see, as I'm looking at the backfield here, he is so good on third downs, but they started to take him out quite a bit for Samaje Perine, and now they're saying Chris Evans is going to be the favorite for the third down role. So
Captain America.
Exactly. Oh, yeah. So I do like Evans as like a last round stab in case everything does happen to Mixon. We saw Perine put up, 20-something points. So whether it's Perine, Evans, that's a handcuff that you want to pay attention to. You don't necessarily have to draft unless it's a best ball and you want to take him in your last couple rounds. Okay, sure. But ultimately, Mixon still, 290 carries. I think he'll be nice and efficient with it. I actually bumped up his career yards per carry. We talked about this yesterday, as I typically will go right around their average unless there's a big change. And the biggest change for the Bengals, I want to hint at that. We didn't really even talk about Burrow yet. We went right into the running backs. They have the best offensive line by far they've had in as long as I've been watching football. This line is enormously upgraded. They have Collins coming over from Dallas last year. Joe Thuney at guard. They drafted a first rounder just a couple years ago. He's really coming into his own. There's two other moves they made, but there was one side of the line that was pretty solid last year, and then one side that just got, as you saw there, Donald, decimated time and time and time again, the right side. And they've made humongous upgrades with Thuney, with Collins, and they also upgraded their center. His name's escaping me off the top of my head right now. But either way, if you looked at the Pro Football Focus grades, it was an insane leap in talent. So I could see them going from, they were ranked bottom 25 in lines last year, which is just crazy to make the Super Bowl like that. But now I could see them leaping, honestly, into the top 10. We saw that happen with the Browns a couple of years ago when they just heavily invested in it. And suddenly they had a top 10 line and they were starting to steamroll teams. So I really am excited about what that means for Mixon, what that means for Burrow. And I don't think people are talking about it nearly enough, what this offense could look like if Burrow actually has time to sit back there and just let those routes. We saw it firsthand in the Super Bowl.
He did not have last year. I mean, this guy was running for his life.
Well, that might have been the difference between them winning and losing the game. Because if you remember that, one of the last plays of the game, Jamar Chase dusted Jalen Ramsey. He had the step on him, but Burrow had already gotten hit and gone down. If they had just held it maybe a second longer, we could have been talking about a different Super Bowl champion. So between Mixon, between Burrow, and also, of course, the receivers as ancillary benefits of having some more time to develop those deep routes, I am just all in on this attack, even at lesser than average volume, I think they're just going to explode.
Me too.
So,
I love them. And there's such fun stacks also if you happen to like land one of those. I mean, I know that hits you in a certain kind of way. I know.
Yeah.
I'm
not dry anymore. I'll tell you that.
No. And we're early in the pod too. We're 7 minutes in. Jamar Chase, obviously you've got him. I want to say you had him 3 on your wide receiver list at both projections and in, your big board. Slight discrepancy on T. Higgins. You actually have him projected to produce wide receiver 8 numbers, but you got him down at 12. So a little surprised by that. Again, I can't tell exactly if I'm surprised by how high you had him projected or by the fact that you weren't willing to take a little bit of a higher stab on the big board.
And honestly, maybe I do. He's not a guy that I am lower on his ability or anything of that nature. You know me. I love T. Higgins forever. You've loved T. Higgins forever. He actually outscored Jamar Chase over the second half of the season.
Oh, yeah.
If you take out Jamar Chase's 55-point effort, which is, you can't play that game.
No, you can't play that game.
Wins you the title in that week. So you can't play that game, but he did. Higgins, it was just as good, if not better, for a good half of the season than Jamar Chase. So these guys are both elite. I do have 25% going to Jamar Chase, 22% going to Higgins, 144, 127 respectively. I do just think Jamar Chase can do a little bit more, 17 yards per reception compared to 14 and a half. Both of those numbers.
Higgins is a monster, though. Come on.
They're both monsters. I mean, realistically, I do think Jamar Chase is the better player. In fact, he might be the best receiver in the league in the next couple of years.
Maybe.
But Higgins is really just, if Chase wasn't so good, it would be a much clearer 1A, 1B, which it was a lot of last year. I do think that it kind of flipped in the playoffs. You saw Chase kind of emerge as that alpha, whereas Higgins was a good number 2.
I mean, you agree that T. Higgins on, not on this team, on just about any other team in the league, like 75, 80% of the other teams in the league, he's the wide receiver 1.
I mean, the Packers passed up T. Higgins to draft Jordan Love. Imagine if that had flipped back and he was the number 1 for the Packers right now. Like he'd
be number 1 for 3/4 of the teams in the league.
I don't see a difference. I mean, Adams is one of the best receivers in the league. I think T. Higgins would put up like 90% of what Devontae Adams does if he was the number 1 with Green Bay. He is just that nasty. I mean, we're raving about 2 guys that everybody
I know. These are not hot takes. Hey, we think Chase and Higgins are good.
No, wide receiver 3. It's just one of those things. You're seeing Chase go top 5 in best ball drafts, and it at first seems a little rich, but he is the type. If you had Chase last year in Week 17, the guy that won the Best Ball Mania had Chase. He's the type of guy that has those spike weeks. So if you're doing a tournament, at first, you can't have Chase, but there's very few people, if maybe only Chase, that can just score 50 points. It is a very, very rare list. Granted, T. Higgins the week before that had put up 35 or something himself. So it is just one of those offense that it's not enough volume that each one of them is going to be a clear number 1 every single week. But more often than not, there's going to be plenty of weeks when they both are top 15. There's going to be more often than not that's going to be the case. So I love both those guys. I would be more than happy with either as my number 1, including Higgins in round 3. I've been scooping him up everywhere that I can get him in round 3. To me, it just doesn't leave much meat on the bone for Tyler Boyd. 16% target share, 92 targets. A decent catch rate is the slot guy. 804 and 4. It's it's usable. He'll have a couple 20-point days mixed in there. His real upside comes, and the reason I am still drafting him, if something happens to either Higgins and Chase, we've seen top 15 seasons out of Tyler Boyd when he was the number 1. He can shoulder heavy workloads. So to me, he's like the ultimate wide receiver handcuff with benefits type of situation here. Should anything happen to those other guys? Because it is a healthy pie. I mean, we didn't even talk about over 5,000 yards.
No, I think the pie's healthy.
That is the most in the league I have for anybody right now is Joe Burrow, 5,181 yards, 38 touchdowns. That is a lot to happen on, again, 564 attempts, not the most in the league. That's just how impressed I am, and that's why I bumped his completion percentage up to 73% because of the offensive line. I just really think people are not considering it. Everyone's calling for regression from Burrow, whereas I'm like that regression from Burrow from those a lot of people, we're all tainted from the fantasy playoffs where Burrow went crazy. I mean, I'm not going to say he's going to do that for 16 straight games. He was averaging almost 500 yards a game. But with this line, I wouldn't be shocked to see him consistently putting up those top 5 numbers. He had a pretty, if you remember last year, mediocre year until those last 3 weeks. And then he just went bananas.
Yeah, but if he doesn't get hurt, he's going to be great.
And that's the other part of it is he came into the season a little bit sluggish. The first 7 weeks, he ended up averaging, mid QB2 numbers. And then from like the mid-season on, when he was coming off a brutal surgery. When he finally had that like fully healthy, he went crazy. So ultimately, now that he's fully healthy entering the year, he's not rehabbing. That's a really good point. Like I am very excited about that for sure. Hayden Hurst, I have him catching 6 touchdowns just because it's such an explosive offense. Good luck figuring out what weeks those come in. You remember Uzuma, like he had, I think, 5 to 6 last year. 3 of them came in 1 week, and then you didn't hear from him for 5 weeks. But he had a nice playoff stretch too. So like it's not, he's draftable, Hayden Hurst. I certainly wouldn't want him as my top tight end because I think he's going to be a little bit unpredictable. But he is athletic, and when he was used extensively just a couple years ago, he was a top 15 tight end. So he's draftable, but to me, obviously, we're not saying anything too new. It's a very concentrated pie. Yeah. Higgins, Chase, Mixon, all should go in your top 2 at worst, round 3 for T. Higgins rounds. And Burrow should be a top 6 quarterback off everybody's board.
Well, obviously, we're not going to talk this long about every team, but it was like kind of like how we talked about the Rams. There's some teams we really like talking about.
Look at these guys.
I'm looking at some of the other teams in this division. I'm like, I don't have anywhere near as much stuff to say about these guys. And
what is up, you fantasy wolf? Thanks so much for tuning in. If you haven't already, share your thoughts in the comments. Check out some more videos and join the newest Wolfpack by subscribing below.